The morning sun was slow to rise over the quiet town of Brookfield. The streets were empty, the air still. In a small wooden house at the edge of town, Ethan Cole, a 24-year-old college student, unlocked the door to his late grandfather's home. It had been 3 years since anyone had stepped inside. Dust covered the shelves, the curtains were pale, and the smell of old paper filled the air. Ethan looked around and sighed. "Feels like time stopped here," he whispered to himself. He had come to clean the house, maybe sell it later. His grandfather, Arthur Cole, had passed away quietly in his sleep. Most people in the town remembered Arthur as a kind old man, a retired soldier who loved fixing clocks and collecting strange things. But to Ethan, he was always a mystery, quiet, secretive, and lost in his own thoughts. As Ethan walked through the hallway, he noticed the old photographs on the wall, soldiers standing together, airplanes, and one picture of his grandfather in a military uniform, smiling proudly. There was a medal pinned on his chest, but Ethan didn't recognize it. He kept walking until he reached the basement door. It was half open, and a faint cold breeze came from below. Ethan frowned. "That's strange," he said. He slowly walked down the wooden stairs, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The basement was dark and filled with old furniture, boxes, and broken tools. Spider webs hung from the ceiling like curtains. He turned on his phone's flashlight and started looking around. At first, it was just dust and junk. But then, something caught his attention: a small wooden table pushed against the wall. On it lay a rusted clock, stopped at exactly 12:06. The strange part? It looked like it had been ticking just moments ago. Ethan picked it up and turned it over. Nothing. Just a date scratched on the back, 1945. He placed it down and continued exploring. As he stepped closer to the far corner of the room, one of the wooden floorboards creaked loudly under his foot. It sounded hollow. Curious, he knelt down and tapped it again, definitely hollow. He grabbed a nearby wrench and carefully lifted the plank. Beneath it, hidden in the dark, was a small metal box. It was old, covered in dust and rust, but still strong. A faded paper note was tied to it with string. Ethan slowly opened the note. In his grandfather's handwriting, it said, "Do not open until the right time." Ethan stared at the note, confused. "What does that even mean?" he muttered. He held the box up to the light. There was a keyhole in front, but no key anywhere. The box was heavier than it looked. As he turned it in his hands, he heard something strange inside, a soft ticking sound, almost like a heartbeat. He froze. "Wait, that's impossible," he whispered. The ticking got faster, tick, 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 and then suddenly stopped. The silence after was louder than any sound. A chill ran down his spine. He placed the box on the table and stepped back. Maybe it was some kind of old clock mechanism, he thought. But something about the note, the locked box, and the ticking felt wrong. He looked around again, hoping for clues. On a nearby shelf, he found an old photo frame covered in dust. He wiped it clean and gasped. It showed his grandfather standing with a group of soldiers, all smiling. But behind them, in the background, there was something strange, a large metal sphere with wires and lights, almost like a bomb, but not quite. On the bottom of the photo, someone had written, "Operation AR 1945. Ethan frowned. He flipped the photo over, and there, written in pencil, were 3 words. A.R 1206 remember. His eyes widened. The clock on the table had stopped at 12:06. The same time. He felt his heart race. "What were you hiding, Grandpa?" he said softly. The basement felt colder now. The air seemed heavier. Ethan suddenly heard a faint sound like whispering coming from behind him. He turned around quickly, his flashlight shaking. Nothing was there. Just shadows. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. "It's just my mind playing tricks," he said, but his voice trembled. He decided to take the box upstairs. Maybe he'd figure it out later. But as he picked it up again, he noticed something new, a small red light blinking faintly from inside the lock. He froze in fear. "What the hell?" he whispered. The light blinked twice, then stopped. The ticking started again, louder this time, echoing through the basement walls. Ethan dropped the box on the table and backed away. The ticking grew faster, like it was counting down. Panic filled his chest. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped again. Complete silence. The house creaked softly. Dust floated in the light coming from the stairs. Ethan waited, holding his breath. Then, from somewhere deep inside the box, a faint metallic click echoed. Ethan's flashlight flickered. For a second, the entire basement glowed blue, and in that flash, Ethan thought he saw something on the far wall, a shadow of a man, standing perfectly still. He blinked, and it was gone. Heart pounding, Ethan grabbed the box and ran upstairs, slamming the basement door behind him. As he leaned against the door, breathing hard, he looked down at the box in his hands. The red light was gone now, and the ticking had stopped again. But deep inside, he knew one thing for sure: whatever this was, it wasn't just an old clock. It was something his grandfather had hidden for a reason. Something connected to the past. Something that was never meant to be found. Ethan could not sleep that night. The image of the glowing box and the shadow in the basement kept playing in his mind like a broken record. Every time he closed his eyes, he could hear the ticking again, soft, slow, and alive. At 2 a.m., he sat on his bed, staring at the box placed on the table beside him. The red light was gone, but the strange energy around it still lingered. It felt as if the air itself hummed quietly whenever he got too close. He whispered to himself, "What are you hiding, Grandpa?" The note "Do not open until the right time" replayed in his head. What was the right time? Why would his grandfather hide something like this? He turned the box over again, searching for clues. The lock was small but sturdy, made of old metal that didn't look like anything modern. There was also a symbol engraved next to the keyhole, a triangle with a clock inside it. He remembered the photo from the basement, his grandfather standing next to a strange metallic sphere labeled Operation AR. And the words written on the back of the photo. A.R. 1206. Remember. 1206. The clock had stopped at that time. And now, the same numbers whispered through his thoughts like a code waiting to be solved. Ethan decided to search the house again, this time more carefully. He grabbed a flashlight and went room by room, looking for anything connected to his grandfather's war days. In the study room, old books were stacked in neat piles. Maps, letters, and broken radios filled the shelves. But one drawer in the desk was locked. He tried pulling it, no use. After a few tries, he found a tiny keyhole, almost invisible under the handle. "Locked again," he murmured. "You really liked hiding things, didn't you, Grandpa?" He knelt down and checked under the desk. Nothing. Then his flashlight caught something, a carved mark under the wooden surface. It was the same triangle with clock symbol. Ethan pressed on it gently, and with a faint click, a secret compartment slid open. Inside was a small metal key, tied with a piece of string. Attached to it was a tag that read, "Shed A.R." His heart skipped a beat. The same letters again, AR. He rushed to the back door. The old shed behind the house had always been locked. His grandfather used to tell him never to go inside, saying it was full of junk and danger. But now Ethan knew that was a lie. The night was cold, and the moonlight painted the yard silver. The shed door creaked as he unlocked it with the key. Dust and darkness greeted him. Inside, the smell of oil and metal filled the air. There were shelves of old tools, engines, and strange parts that looked like they belonged in a lab, not a backyard shed. On the wall, a faded poster showed a map of Europe with red circles drawn around certain places. Ethan walked deeper in, brushing off cobwebs. Then he saw another photo frame lying face down on a workbench. When he picked it up, he froze. It was his grandfather again, but this time, he wasn't smiling. He looked younger, wearing a soldier's coat and holding what looked like the same box Ethan had found in the basement. Standing beside him was another man, tall, wearing a dark trench coat and a hat that covered half his face. On the back of the photo, only one name was written: Agent Riker. Ethan felt a chill crawl down his back. He whispered, A.R. The letters matched. Agent Riker. The same initials written on the photo in the basement. Before he could think further, something clinked under his shoe. He looked down. The small metal key he had brought from the desk was glowing faintly blue. What the? He muttered, bending down. The glow pulsed softly, like it was reacting to something nearby. He turned his flashlight toward the back corner of the shed and saw a large wooden crate. On its surface was burned the same triangle clock symbol. His heart pounded. He stepped closer and used the glowing key on the small latch. It clicked open with a sharp metallic sound. Inside was a velvet pouch, and inside the pouch another key, this one older, heavier, and made of dark iron. Tied around it was a note written in the same handwriting as before. When the ticking stops, use this. Ethan stared at the note, speechless. The ticking box. The warnings. The code. Everything was leading somewhere, but where? Suddenly, a gust of cold wind blew the shed door shut behind him. The light from his flashlight flickered. He froze, listening. Then tick. One soft sound. Then another. Tick. 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 It was coming from the box in his pocket, the small metal one he had brought along. But he hadn't touched it. He hadn't opened it. The ticking grew louder, faster. The blue light from the key brightened, filling the shed with a strange glow. Tools began rattling on the shelves. The ground vibrated beneath his feet. Ethan panicked and dropped the box on the floor. It landed with a dull thud and the ticking stopped. Silence again. The air in the shed grew still. But Ethan knew one thing now: whatever this box was, it was waking up. He picked up the old iron key and looked at it closely. The handle was shaped like a small gear. The words "Property of Project A.R" were engraved along its edge. He whispered to himself, voice trembling, Project A.R. Agent Riker. Grandpa, what did you do? Lightning flashed outside. For a moment, Ethan saw his reflection in the shed window, but behind him, he swore he saw another face, watching from the darkness. When he turned, no one was there. He ran out of the shed, clutching the iron key tight in his hand, rain beginning to fall. He didn't look back. Inside the shed, the box lay still. But for a moment, just one brief moment, its red light flickered again. And this time, it didn't stop. The rain continued through the night. Thunder rolled over the quiet town of Brookfield as Ethan sat by his desk, staring at the iron key. Its dark surface still shone faintly under the lamplight. He could feel its weight, not just in his hand, but in his chest, like it carried the weight of something huge, something dangerous. The metal box sat beside him. Cold. Silent. Still. He hadn't heard the ticking since he left the shed. But every few minutes, he caught himself glancing at it, expecting the sound to start again. Ethan whispered, "What are you, really?" He turned the key slowly in his hand. The note that came with it echoed in his mind. When the ticking stops, use this. The ticking had stopped hours ago. Did that mean now was the time? For a long moment, he just stared, thinking of his grandfather. Arthur Cole, the quiet old man who fixed clocks, who smiled rarely, and who always told Ethan that time is both a gift and a weapon. Ethan never understood that, until now. He took a deep breath and inserted the iron key into the box's keyhole. It fit perfectly. His heart raced. Here goes nothing, he murmured, and turned it. Click! A soft hum filled the air. The box began to glow, faint blue light leaking through the cracks. Ethan backed away as the light grew brighter. Then, with a slow metallic sound, the lid opened on its own. Inside was not what he expected. A small metallic sphere, no bigger than a tennis ball, lay inside. It was smooth, polished, and pulsing faintly with a soft blue light. Alongside it was a folded letter, yellow and old, written in his grandfather's handwriting. Ethan hesitated for a moment before picking up the letter. The paper was fragile, the ink faded, but the words were still clear. Ethan. If you are reading this, it means the world has forgotten what really happened in 1945. I was part of Project AR, a mission not to build a weapon, but to stop one. What you hold in your hands is not a bomb. It is a fragment of time, a device that can bend moments, rewind seconds, and freeze what cannot be stopped. We failed to use it. And the world suffered for it. If the device ever wakes again, you must finish what I started. Arthur Cole. Ethan's hands shook as he read the last line. A fragment of time, he whispered. He looked at the glowing sphere again. The hum from it grew stronger, and suddenly the air around him shimmered. He blinked, and for a brief second, the room wasn't his anymore. He saw sandbags, smoke, soldiers shouting, and sirens wailing. The smell of fire and metal filled the air. A man ran past him, his grandfather, but younger, shouting, "Get it to safety. Don't let Riker take it." Ethan gasped. "Grandpa." Then he blinked again, and the vision was gone. He was back in the room. The sphere still glowed faintly. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. He whispered, "Was that the past?" He picked up the sphere carefully, turning it in his hand. As soon as his fingers touched a small symbol on its side, a triangle with a clock inside it, the vision returned. This time clearer. Stronger. He was standing in a dark underground bunker. Men in military coats worked around strange machines. Papers covered with formulas and blueprints lay scattered on tables. His grandfather stood beside a man in a black trench coat, the same face Ethan saw in the photo. Agent Riker. Arthur, Riker's voice said coldly, "We could rule history itself with this device. Why hide it?" Grandfather Arthur shouted back, "It's not meant to rule time, Riker. It's meant to protect it." Riker drew a pistol. "Then protect this moment." Before Ethan could react, a gunshot echoed through the bunker. Arthur fell. The vision shattered. Ethan screamed, and suddenly he was back in his room, gasping for breath. The sphere rolled from his hand onto the floor, still glowing. He fell to his knees, trembling. His mind spun with confusion and fear. His grandfather had been shot. Agent Riker had taken the device. But then, how did it end up buried under the house? He looked back at the letter. A faint second page had stuck behind it. He unfolded it with shaking hands. If Riker ever returns, the device will react. The blue light means time is unstable again. You must find the other half. I hid it where the war ended 1206. Remember, time fights back. Ethan frowned. 12:06 again, where the war ended. Was it a time? A place? Or something else? As he tried to think, the blue light from the sphere grew brighter, filling the room with energy. The papers on his desk began to shake. The sound of ticking filled the air once more, faster, sharper, louder. Ethan grabbed the box and shouted, "Stop! Please, stop!" The ticking suddenly froze. The light dimmed. And then, a deep voice, faint but clear, came from the sphere. "Arthur Cole, sequence incomplete. Awaiting command." Ethan froze. The voice wasn't human. He whispered, "You're not alive, are you?" The voice repeated, "Sequence incomplete. Awaiting command." The room was silent again. Ethan sat back, his heart pounding. The letter, the light, the voice, all of it pointed to one truth. His grandfather hadn't just hidden the box to protect the world. He had hidden it because it could change history. Ethan looked at the glowing sphere, fear and curiosity in his eyes. He whispered, "If this can change history, maybe it can change the past too." Outside, thunder cracked again, and in that flash of lightning, for a split second, Ethan thought he saw a shadowy figure standing outside the window. Watching him. The next morning, Ethan woke up to silence. No ticking. No glowing. Just the sound of soft rain outside. For a moment, he wondered if everything that happened last night had only been a dream. But when he looked at his desk, the metal sphere was still there, glowing faintly blue. The letter from his grandfather lay beside it, half burned at the edges from the strange light. Ethan rubbed his eyes and whispered, "This can't be real." He reached out slowly, touching the sphere again. It felt warm this time, almost alive. As soon as his skin made contact, the room darkened. The air grew heavy. His vision blurred, and suddenly, he wasn't in his room anymore. He was standing in the middle of a battlefield. The sound of explosions filled the air. Smoke and fire rose all around him. Soldiers ran past, shouting orders. The ground shook beneath his feet. Ethan turned in shock. He wasn't dreaming. Somehow, the device had pulled him into the past, into 1945. Through the chaos, he saw a familiar face, his grandfather, young and strong, carrying the same glowing sphere in a protective case. Arthur Cole was running toward a damaged bunker. Ethan shouted, "Grandpa!" But no one heard him. His voice echoed without sound. It was as if he was a ghost in time, able to see but not to change anything. Arthur reached the bunker and shouted to another soldier, "We have to hide it. Riker knows where we are." A man in a dark trench coat appeared from the shadows. "Agent Riker." His cold eyes locked on Arthur. "You can't stop me, Cole. The future belongs to those who control time." Arthur shouted back, "No one should control it." Ethan watched helplessly as the two men struggled. Riker grabbed the box and tried to pull it away. Arthur hit a switch on the side of the device and everything went white. The next moment, Ethan was thrown backward and suddenly he was back in his own room, gasping for air. The sphere rolled away from his hand, still humming softly. He sat there for a while, breathing hard, trying to understand what he'd just seen. Grandpa hid the device during the war. Riker tried to take it, but how did it end? Ethan whispered. He picked up the letter again. The last words replayed in his head. "You must find the other half. I hid it where the war ended." 12:06. 12:06, he murmured. That time again. Ethan grabbed his laptop and searched the old war archives online. After a few minutes, he found it a classified document mentioning Operation 1206, the exact moment the ceasefire was declared in 1945. The location? Berlin, Germany. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "You hid the other part in Berlin." But before he could think further, the sphere on his desk lit up again, brighter this time. The same deep, mechanical voice spoke. Arthur Cole detected. Sequence 2 activated. Ethan froze. "I'm not Arthur Cole," he shouted. The sphere replied. "DNA match confirmed. Bloodline authorization accepted. Message retrieval in progress." The sphere floated an inch off the desk. A beam of blue light shot upward, forming a holographic image, the face of his grandfather. Ethan gasped. "Grandpa." The image flickered but spoke clearly. "Ethan, if you're hearing this, then Riker's shadow still lives. The device was split into two to stop him. One half I buried here. The other, he took. You must stop him before the halves connect again. If they merge, time itself will collapse." The voice trembled, as if fading. "Remember, the device obeys the strongest will. Never let anger guide you, Ethan. That's how Riker fell. The hologram vanished. The sphere fell silent. Ethan sat frozen, heart pounding. Riker's shadow still lives, he repeated. That made no sense. Riker would be over 100 years old by now. Unless time hadn't moved for him. Ethan stood up and paced the room. If Riker used the other half of the device, he could still be alive. He looked at his hand. The faint burn mark shaped like a clock was glowing again. He whispered, "Oh my God, he's coming." As if in answer, the window behind him cracked with a loud bang. Ethan spun around. Outside, standing across the street, was a man in a long black coat and hat, motionless, staring straight at him. The same figure from his dreams. From the photos. Agent Riker. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He blinked and the man was gone. He ran to the window, looking around, but the street was empty. Only the rain and the sound of thunder filled the silence. Ethan stepped back, his mind racing. Was Riker really alive? Or was time itself showing him pieces of the past again? He looked back at the sphere. Its blue light had changed. Now it pulsed red. A warning. He picked it up carefully. If Riker wants this, he said softly, he'll have to take it from me. The voice from the device spoke once more. Warning, proximity alert. Temporal signal detected. Before Ethan could react, the light in his room flickered. Papers flew off the desk. The temperature dropped. Then, out of the red glow, a voice, deep and calm, whispered in his ear. Arthur's boy, you shouldn't have opened the box. Ethan spun around, but there was no one there. Only the red light, growing brighter, and the sound of ticking returning again. He clutched the sphere tightly, fear and determination mixing inside him. He didn't understand everything yet, but he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just his grandfather's past anymore. Now, it was his war too. The night was cold, and the wind outside screamed through the cracks of the old house. Ethan stood in the center of his room, the sphere glowing red in his hands, the ticking growing faster. Tick, 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 like a clock running out of time. The voice from the sphere spoke again, sharp and mechanical. Temporal interference detected. Sequence merging in progress. Ethan's heart pounded. Merging? You mean Riker? Before he could finish, a blast of light flashed through the window. The glass shattered, and a shadow stepped inside, tall, calm, and dressed in black. It was Agent Riker. He looked exactly as he did in the photos from 1945, not older, not younger. His face was untouched by time. His eyes glowed faintly with the same red light as the sphere. Hello, Ethan, Riker said softly. His voice was smooth but cold. You have something that belongs to me. Ethan stepped back, clutching the sphere. You shouldn't be here. You're not supposed to exist. Riker smiled faintly. Time doesn't decide who exists, boy. Will does. He lifted his gloved hand, and in his palm, another sphere appeared. It pulsed red, identical to Ethan's, but darker, angrier. The other half, Ethan whispered. Yes, Riker said. And when these two halves reunite, history will no longer be a line. It will be mine to rewrite. Ethan shook his head. My grandfather tried to stop you. Riker's smile faded. Your grandfather was a fool. He thought time should stay pure. But he didn't understand time is a weapon. With it, we can erase pain, erase loss, erase mistakes. Ethan's voice trembled. That's not control, that's destruction. Riker took a step closer. You don't understand now. But when you lose enough, you will. Give me the sphere. Ethan held it tighter. No. The red light flared brighter. Both spheres began to hum, their energies pulling toward each other like magnets. The house trembled. Books fell from the shelves. Riker shouted, You can't stop the merge. Ethan shouted back, Then I'll stop you. He lifted his sphere high. The blue light inside it fought against the red, two forces colliding, creating a storm of light and sound. Time itself began to bend. The rain outside froze midair. The clock on the wall stopped ticking. For a moment, everything was silent, then Ethan was pulled into a blinding vision. He stood again in the past, the same battlefield from before, but this time, everything was burning. His grandfather was there, bleeding, struggling to hide the device. Riker stood over him, aiming his gun. Arthur Cole looked straight at Ethan, as if he could see him through time. He whispered, "Ethan, you must finish it." Ethan shouted, "How? Tell me how." Arthur reached into his pocket and threw something toward him, a small silver watch. Ethan caught it just as Riker fired his gun. The world shattered again. Ethan fell to his knees in his own room, gasping. The silver watch was still in his hand, real this time, glowing with the same blue light as the sphere. On the back of the watch, words were engraved. "When time breaks, reset it." Ethan looked up. Riker stood in front of him, his eyes burning red. "You can't change what's already written," Riker shouted. Ethan pressed the watch's button. "Then I'll write it myself." The blue light exploded outward, consuming the red. The two spheres collided midair, blue versus red, and for a moment, the world went completely white. There was no sound. No gravity. No time. When the light faded, Ethan found himself standing in the same basement where it had all started. The air was still. The dust floated slowly in the sunlight. The box was gone. The photos on the wall were different now, no more war scenes. Instead, one showed his grandfather standing in front of the house, smiling with his family. Another showed a peaceful town, untouched by conflict. Ethan blinked in disbelief. Did it change? He ran upstairs and opened the old newspaper on the table. The headline read, "Global Peace Treaty Signed 1945 Ends Without Major Conflict." His heart stopped. The war, it had ended differently. His grandfather had succeeded. Ethan looked out the window. The world outside was calm, bright, alive. Children played on the street. Birds sang. It was as if history itself had been rewritten. He whispered, "You did it, Grandpa, you really did it." On the desk, the silver watch ticked quietly. The hands stopped at 12:06, then slowly began to move again. For the first time, the ticking wasn't frightening. It was peaceful. Ethan smiled faintly until he noticed something else. A letter lay under the watch. It hadn't been there before. He picked it up. The handwriting was his grandfather's. "Ethan. Time is not a line, but a loop. Every ending is another beginning. What you changed today will be remembered tomorrow, not by history, but by those who live it. Be careful what you touch next. Some doors, once opened, do not close again. Arthur." Ethan folded the letter and looked out the window once more. The world was safe for now. But deep inside, he knew the story wasn't really over. Because somewhere, beyond this timeline, in another fragment of time, a red light flickered in the darkness. And the faint sound of ticking began once more.